Îmi face plăcere ca pentru începutul dialogului nostru să invit la cuvânt o personalitate din lumea economică a vestului european, domnul Christophe Lagrange, membru al Consiliului Executiv al EURANIMI, Asociația Europeană a Importatorilor și Distribuitorilor de Metale Neintegrate. Vom asculta cu atenție alocuțiunea dânsului. Sunt convins că vor ieși pentru noi, cei din România, idei de luat în seamă, ținând seama de experiența celui care ne vorbește acum. Bonjour, Monsieur Lagrange.
Bonjour, and a very good morning to all. Allow me first of all to congratulate the organizers of this event for putting together such impressive conference in these special times, and to thank them for inviting me as a speaker. If you agree, we shall focus on two major products that are vital to the economy, steel and aluminium, and in particular on its current shortage. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Christophe Lagrange. I'm Belgian and one of the founders of EURANIMI, a Brussels-based European Association of Independent Importers of Metal. In other words, I represent our members that are generally small to medium-sized, often family-owned companies distributing or processing steel, stainless steel, and aluminium. And the subject that I offer to explore more in detail with you is the policy of the European Commission when it comes to protecting the European market against imports of non-European steel or aluminium. In clear, the many import barriers erected by Brussels aiming at safeguarding the European economy and in particular protect the European steel mills and the aluminium producing industry against unfair competition. Those among you who are processing steel or aluminium have certainly not failed to notice the recent shortage of steel, in particular stainless steel and aluminium. And this shortage is causing steep price increases, much longer delivery times, and is now more and more severely disrupting the normal production of many production plants or construction sites. In this period of strong economic recovery from the COVID pandemic, with a virus that still has not been eradicated, such additional problem affecting Europe is definitely not welcome. In the current conditions of steel shortage, one would wonder why the European Commission keeps on imposing one import restriction after the other on steel and aluminium, shutting off by exorbitant import duties the possibility that imported material would bring some relief to the very tight procurement situation currently prevailing in Europe. It's not just one or two import barriers that are being erected, it's a real wall that is being built. Not less than half of the anti-dumping cases that are currently under investigation by the EC are related to imports of steel or aluminium. On top of which, last June, the European Commission and the European Council extended for another 3 years the safeguard measures taken against the import of 26 steel products originating from practically every steel-producing country. Because of this current combination of shortage, reinforced by, in our opinion, excessive import restrictions, the prices for steel and aluminium are soaring in Europe, and our steel processing factories are losing competitiveness towards manufacturers operating from non-EU countries. Not only there, labor cost is cheaper outside Europe, also the raw material is cheaper. The European Commission erects import barriers to prevent that too cheap steel and aluminium would enter Europe. And by doing so, since outside Europe factories have access to this cheap steel or cheap aluminium, the import is unleashed to a flood of too cheap manufactured products. These end products come in such a wide variety that it would no longer be possible to control its flow. If it is true that the mills suffer from unfair competition, then the import barriers on steel and aluminium are simply shifting the problem downstream. And in such case, the situation affects not just a few European steel mills or aluminium producers, but a much larger number of European manufacturing companies and a tenfold of European workers. Why is Europe doing this to itself? The decision process in import restrictions ought to be revisited. When investigating on the possibility to implement anti-dumping duties, the European Commission receives and welcomes input from all interested parties. Everyone, Europeans and non-Europeans alike, is invited to express his views, to warn the concerned EC teams of possible unwanted consequences of some decisions, to provide data or to object with counter-arguments. Everything is very open. The non-confidential arguments put forward by each party are published and accessible to all. After having heard all the parties involved, evaluated all the pros and the cons, the team of the European Commission ultimately decides if additional duties should be imposed on the import of those products or not. This looks like a perfectly transparent, fair, democratic system. Was it not that, in practice, the system has three shortcomings? The first one is that the team of the European Commission, acting as both investigator and judge on the case, are not composed of market professionals. They are lawyers, economists, but they are generalists. The cases they are investigating are, however, very complex and very technical. Not only they require a deep understanding of the industrial process, but also of its market, both upstream and downstream. Trade defense cases affect such a wide variety of different industrial fields that it would be utterly impossible for a man to master the complexity of each individual sector. Its range goes from leather footwear to birch plywood, from optical fiber cables to steel wind towers, from aluminium extrusions to biodiesel. In our opinion, the European Commission should think of developing a system inspired by the principle of the Court of Arbitration, where professional judges are assisted by a college of insiders to the profession, who can put all the collected information and evidence in the right market perspective. The second is that the consequence of the import restrictions affect the parties differently. On the complainant side, the stakes are very high. The European producers have much to gain from a favorable decision of the EC or much to lose from their unfavorable ruling. The local players will do anything possible European producers have much to gain from a favorable decision of the EC or much to lose from their unfavorable ruling. The local players will do anything possible to protect their home market, or in some cases to obtain the implementation of prohibitive import duties so as to get rid of annoying foreign competition. So the European producers will feed the EC teams with a large amount of information, material, evidence, market intelligence. They will spare no efforts, pay top-notch attorneys to assist them, affect some teams of their own to spend large number of man-hours to assemble as information and arguments that will plead in their favor. On the other side, the defendants, the non-EU producers, they merely risk losing an export market where they allegedly make no profit, since they are accused of selling their goods at dumping prices. Besides, They are to proceed in another continent in a language that is not their own, according to rules and cultures they are not familiar with. The match is unequal. The disparity in the consequences of the anti-dumping investigation leads to a totally unbalanced stream of information received by the EC teams, both in quantity and in quality. Since the EC teams are not composed of market professionals, this collected info is one of the major sources of their information. When the vast majority of such material is very generously provided by the complainants, and when a very weak response comes from the defendants, one should not wonder that practically every single case of anti-dumping investigation is closed with a verdict that is very favorable to the European producers. We believe that the European Commission would be well advised to develop an investigation procedure where the downstream of the market professionals that are familiar with both sources of supply, that indifferently use European and non-European material, that they would guide the EC teams as neutral experts into the complexity of these files. And last, the third and last point that influences decisions is that the EC is above all a political institution, where political decisions play an important role. The strategic importance of a flourishing European steel or aluminium industry is disputed by none. Besides, it is a sector employing tens of thousands of workers. Therefore, many European or national politicians are found very supportive to protectionist measures in steel or aluminium. One has, however, to keep in mind that protectionist measures are a double-edged sword. As explained before, a much larger population of European workers are active downstream the steel mills or the aluminium production. The job of hundreds of thousands of workers is put at risk by steel and aluminium prices that are artificially lifted at too high levels by such protectionist measures. We believe that the European Commission should rather work on creating supportive systems to the mills that do not influence the price in Europe of the materials concerned, as this is too detrimental to the competitiveness of its downstream industry. Why not think of a substantial aid in the very expensive ecological investments that the European mills are constantly doing to produce in an ever cleaner manner? Or try to reduce their production or distribution costs by improving the quality of some port or railroad infrastructures, measures that would make the European producers more competitive and cleaner while making the competitiveness of their downstream sectors intact. So I hope that this reflection on the forgotten downstream industry in the EC's steel and aluminium policy will convince some Romanian metal importing companies to join their voices to that of their European colleagues, to work together towards a better and more competitive European steel and aluminium downstream sector. We also hope that these few words will contribute to give some of you a slightly different opinion on the different causes of the current shortage of steel and aluminium. So now I would like to thank the interpreters for having made me understandable to you all. And I would like to thank you all very much for your kind attention. And I wish you a further very interesting continuation of this conference. Thank you.